Hello and welcome to Can I Just Say, a Common Room radio podcast. I'm Elizabeth Stevens.
And I'm Daphne Olive. And today we are covering adaptations of Emma. Sadly, with all of our work/kid/multiple time zones issues, we couldn't have Laline join us for this episode. And I'm very sad about it. But hopefully she will be able to join us for a future episode. I'm not sure when, but we're going to do our best to get her onto this podcast at some point because she is lovely and brilliant. And Afghanistan is just such a great concept for a book. So
yes, fascinating. Absolutely.
Right. So go find that on Amazon and buy it. And in the meantime, and hopefully we'll be able to chat with her about Jane Austen some other time. We have two announcements. Our first announcement is our next book, which I think maybe we said on our last episode, but I'm not sure. Our next book is, we're going back to E.M. Forster. We're going to cover A Room with a View. And we're going to do the same format that we've been doing. We will do the book first. And then in the episode after that, we will be doing the adaptation. I think there's only the one adaptation.
I think there's only one, yeah.
And it's a really big deal for me, that movie. I'm very excited.
I'm so fascinated by this one because I had not read the book before. I had seen that film and wasn't that taken by it. I know that sounds like sacrilege. You're giving me a look right now, but
wow.
This is just what I remember. And I don't know if you needed I don't know.
No,
whatever it is.
I had not read
right
the book.
Now. Oh, really?
No,
See,
I saw it when I was a
wonder.
teenager. I read all of my Forster in college.
I feel that it didn't date particularly well, and it felt a bit stilted to me and a little bit stale. But the book has been gorgeous. I'm in love with the book, so I'm looking forward to watching the adaptation now that I have all of these warm feelings about the material.
It is hard for you to imagine that you're not going to love it, but
I'm certain I will. I'm certain I will. I'm so excited now.
But even if you don't love it, you're going to get to enjoy the crazy enthusiasm that I will have and also our guest, because joining us to talk about the adaptations is Louise Barnes.
Ah, the incomparable goddess, Louise Barnes.
So
Indeed.
Louise talked with us about the book Sense and Sensibility. We also adore her because she was in Black Sails, played one of our favorite characters.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it turns out that Louise and I both had very similar experiences of watching it when it came out in the theater pretty young, and both, basically freaked out when we realized how much we both love this film.
That's going to be a wonderful episode. Mm-hmm.
That's going to be an episode full of a lot of probably hilarious, just freaking out.
Joy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So we're going to do that book and that adaptation. And in the meantime, actually, this is going to drop probably late on Monday. And the very next day, you and I are going to do an event for our patrons where we did this with Becoming Jane about 2 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to do this for Clueless, which was going to be one of the adaptations we covered, but then we decided commentary track would be so much more fun.
A lot of fun to do. I'm looking forward to this. Yes, that's Tuesday the 28th of August. Is it 8 Central? 9?
Yep. 9 Eastern.
Yes, 8 Central and 9 Eastern. Mm-hmm.
So if you are a patron of ours on Patreon, you can actually join us while we do this. There'll be a live chat for patrons while Elizabeth and I drink and talk about Clueless.
Yes. I try not to squeeze too much about the fashion. Yes.
It's going to be super fun. So it's not too late to become our patron at
patreon.com/Common Room Radio.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
You're welcome. Johnny on the spot.
Become our patron at any level, and you can join this. So you will get an email with a link, and that's going to be super fun. Can't wait.
Yes. Yes.
All right. But now we are covering two adaptations of Emma, the 1996 with Gwyneth Paltrow and the 2009 with, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel so bad that I didn't figure this out beforehand.
That's okay. Do your best.
And I know a lot of people love this adaptation, so they probably know just like off the tip of their tongue how to say this. But Romola Garai, I don't know, but she's lovely. and I can't pronounce her name, but she's lovely. So yes, so those are our two Emmas, and these are two very different adaptations. Elizabeth,
They really were.
yeah. So what is your history with these two adaptations?
I had never seen the BBC. I actually wasn't even aware that it was a thing until we started talking about reading Emma, and people were asking if we were going to do the BBC adaptation. I didn't know that it had been done. The 96, I remember. However, I was quite young. 96, I would have been in 6th grade, so probably like 13, not even that, 12, 11 years old, like a kid, basically. Mm-hmm. So I remember watching it and being completely bored by it. And let me tell you right now, I was wrong, ladies and gentlemen. I was incorrect.
Yes, you were well, perhaps correct for your age then.
Yes. Well, and then later on, I never went back to it. I should have gone back to it because, I mean, look at me. I love period dramas. I watch all of them.
I know.
Austin, are you kidding me? But I had this awful snobbishness that is just unforgivable against Gwyneth Paltrow for no reason.
Which a lot of people have.
A lot of people have. She is gorgeous and delightful and brilliant in this movie.
The funny thing is that in the 90s, I was not a child. I was 27 when that came out.
Oh, perfect.
Yes. And Gwyneth Paltrow actually started her career doing, even though, she is a bit of Hollywood royalty family, but
yes,
she started her career doing really edgy stuff, like a lot of independent films and weird stuff. And I think by that, right around then, there's some really great roles. So it was like at that point, it was funny because I don't remember if this is before or after Sliding Doors, but she did two films in a row where she spoke with an English accent, and that kind of shifted her career. But up until that point, I thought of her as kind of edgy. And
that's so interesting.
Yeah, and I know it's so different than her image now and Goop and all, just like her place in popular culture now is so different than it was in the 90s. I think she and I are the same age. Like I had a friend who went to high school with her. In college, I had a friend who had gone to high school with her. So it was just it was just very like her image in popular culture was very, very different then.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember, for me, Gwyneth Paltrow was dating Brad Pitt for a while, and that's the thing that I remember.
Right. I don't remember where
I was just
that
too young.
Fits in the timeline. His image in popular culture was also very different back then. It was just not that long after Thelma and Louise. Like he was a young. He was just like young hot actor, like
young hot sex symbol guy.
Yeah, it was just everything was very different then.
Now he's just an old hot sex symbol guy,
right? Yeah. Not disparaging Brad Pitt,
not at all.
No, by no standards. Yeah,
by no means.
But yes. It was just it's funny. So I got to see it without any, I feel like, baggage about her.
Sure.
And that people probably watching it for the first time now have. It is one of my absolute favorite Austen films. I've watched it so many times.
I enjoyed it so much.
Also, Jeremy Northam. I was really into Jeremy Northam then.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. As well you should have been. Me too, it turns out. He's
fabulous
in this movie. Just fabulous. Yeah,
he is. He's very good.
I much preferred the movie Knightley to the book Knightley. All those problems that I had with him being kind of paternalistic. He was cranky in the movie, but forgivably so. And he didn't have any of those problems I had in the book. I can see now why he was your favorite, because it's possible that he wasn't that heavily influenced in your reading of the book, but it certainly did a lot for Knightley for me to see him portrayed by Jeremy Northam.
Yes, he does. I mean, again, we can talk about this. I mean, a lot of these films do smooth out the rough edges of the men.
That is true.
For the sake of the romance. And let's definitely talk about that when we talk about the two of them. I also had never seen
that.
Yeah, we should. I also had not seen the 2009 until watching it for the podcast. But 1996, one of my favorite films.
Yeah.
Of all time.
2009, is that what we said?
2009, yeah.
2009.
So it's also a while ago.
That's
it's not
a while
like
ago.
A super, right. It's also not a super recent
thing about it.
film.
Yeah. Shall we start with that one, or do you want to start with... I would prefer to start with the BBC myself, unless you wanted to just compare and contrast as we go along.
I would like to compare and contrast as we go along. I actually wanted to start by talking about the choice of tone of each of them, because I feel like while I was watching both of them, I realized that it is in some ways hard to compare them because they each chose an extremely different tone for how to tell this story.
Mm-hmm. What would you call the tone of the BBC?
Well, I think the tone of the BBC is possibly truer to the book. Like, it's more, BBC tone. It's more like, let's tell this story. I mean, it definitely has some comedy, which also the book has comedy, versus the 1996, like, really frames this as a comedy. Like, they really are going for not the laughs in a cheap way, but they definitely are always leaning towards how to frame this in a comedic way. I think much more than the 2009 does. And so that's already kind of a tonal difference.
Interesting. Okay. I see what you're saying. I don't know that I felt that way, mostly because of the actresses who portrayed Harriet Smith. I remembered, I had this vision in my head of Toni Collette as Harriet Smith as being very silly, but she was not. She played her very straight and sincere, and I thought gorgeously. Whereas I felt that the BBC Harriet Smith was very silly.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I think you're right. I think a lot of it is the general tone, like just how the like going from scene to scene happens, less so than the performances, except for Jeremy Northam. Like, there are moments like the archery thing, which we will get. I want to talk about the archery moment.
As long as you like, definitely.
Right. No, but that whole thing of like, please don't shoot my dogs or please don't kill my dogs. Like, there's just all these like lines added in that, again, we can go through scenes and talk about how I think they're great, but they're lines that were added that weren't in the book that are always playful. That's the word. You're right. Comedy is not the right word. Playful. Is the word. And I think that the whole thing, and that it was an interesting choice because, again, it's, 2 hours maybe a little less than 2 hours versus 4.
2 hours on the nose.
Is it 2 hours?
Yeah. I looked it up earlier today so I can know exactly how much time I needed to carve out for myself. Yes.
So 2 hours versus 4. So they had to make choices to condense the story. Some of those choices I love. Some of them I love less. But I think that a lot of the choices about how they framed the scenes, including the playfulness, I'm totally taking on that word. That is the perfect word for it. Served the purpose of condensing the story in a way that still told most of the story. But it is a very different tone. I mean, again, the 2009 has comedy. I mean, because it is Jane Austen. Like, there are always comedic aspects of Jane Austen. Sometimes we're laughing with the characters, sometimes we're laughing at the characters, but there's always an aspect of it. But I feel like overall the tone was not heavier, but less skipping along the way.
Sure,
than the 1996. So that was the first thing I wanted to talk about, and I wanted to see which of those. I don't know how you felt about those two choices.
Well, I'm going to tip my hand a little bit.
Yeah, go for it.
I think the 96 Emma, is the most triumphant adaptation of Jane Austen I have ever seen. I think it caught Jane Austen's specific sense of irony with all of those irony cuts that we got.
Yes. The irony cuts are amazing.
They are so Jane Austen. And then at the very end, when we have Mrs. Elton turn to camera and do the little narration, which, of course, Austen always does at the end of each book, was pitch perfect. I was delighted by it. It felt like there were so many nods to Austen readers that even a really faithful adaptation doesn't quite do, because it's so... I mean, there's a difference between like being by the book and having word for word dialogue attribution and really adapting the source material to make a Jane Austen novel a Jane Austen movie. And I feel like 96 just nailed that. So the choices with the 2009, I do like that we got more of Jane and Frank. Because remember when I told you I can't remember anything about Jane and Frank?
That's my one problem with 96.
Yeah. No, they get the shaft. They really do. You don't get that story. You just don't.
No, you really don't get that story.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why. So you can watch that's totally true. You can watch the 1996 and then read the book and have the experience that you had where you're like, wait a minute, Frank's that bad. Oh God. Oh, right.
Yeah.
Now that I'm thinking about it, Frank's awful. But
Exactly.
you don't actually have that experience with the 1996 because
No. If you know it going into it,
Right.
you can tell and you know that he's the worst
Right.
because it actually, now knowing that Frank Churchill is so bad, that scene over the pianoforte right there in the beginning
Right.
with Ewan McGregor and Gwyneth Paltrow,
Right.
I just want to smack his face like I
Right.
hate him. So once you know, that's one thing, but it would be I wish I could remember.
Right. And you do get Box Hill, but you don't get the speech about people who like meet and then
No,
and people
you
who
don't get that at all.
Get engaged with not knowing each other very well and all of that. You don't get any of that. You just get the flirting and the inappropriate behavior towards Miss Bates.
Right.
But
Which makes him a little, a little unfeeling, a little smarmy, but nothing nothing like what you get from the book.
And honestly, with Box Hill, we're just going to go all over the place. This is how we're going to talk about this one, and I'm okay with it.
That's fine. I'm cool with that too. Yes.
With Box Hill, also, I mean, I want to talk quite a bit about Jeremy Northam versus Johnny Lee Miller as our two Knightleys, but
Sure.
the moment where Knightley scolds Emma for having shamed Miss Bates.
Yes.
Jeremy Northam does that pitch perfect as far as I'm concerned because he manages to be angry with her but also so upset for himself and for them as friends / potential lovers. He manages to do all of that at one time, that he's upset, but you also can see how difficult it is for him to be upset. He doesn't want to be angry with her, but he feels like he has to. And this is why, for me, this is why Jeremy Northam makes Knightley perfect, because he's not lording anything over her. It pains him to have to do this. Mm-hmm. But he does it because he loves her. He does it because, even though at that moment he thinks that she's going to marry Frank Churchill, it's not like he's doing it for some future that he thinks he's going to have with her.
Oh,
he's
that's a good
positive.
point.
He's positive that she's going to marry Frank Churchill, but he still does it. Like, that's what he says later on, that he wanted to do it while he still had the opportunity to.
Right.
He's doing it for her.
Mm-hmm.
And you see all of that turmoil. But on the flip side, if you take away the Frank and Jane story, you don't really understand why it's so difficult for Knightley. Like, you lose some aspect of to what extent Frank Churchill, if he's less despicable, then his influence on Emma is less disturbing.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And Knightley already suspects that there's a connection between Frank Churchill and Jane. Like, he already has a sense of to what extent Frank Churchill is as despicable as we find out he is. So I'm so torn with those two things. I mean, also, me, like, a huge part for me of Austen is this discussion of responsibility.
Yes.
And if you take away the Frank Churchill story, you still have the question of Emma's responsibility, which I think the 1996 does beautifully.
They do. I was so impressed with that scene where she goes to visit the Clarks. That was beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So you really have a sense of that, but you lose the sense of, which is also a big part of Austen, is exposing men like Frank Churchill.
Yes.
And so if you take that out, like, yes, it's still a beautiful story. It's a beautiful romance. But there's, for me, an essential element of the story.
Yeah,
that
kind of lowers the stakes.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And lowers the social commentary aspect of it.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very fair.
It's hard. I mean, again, 2 hours versus 4 hours. We have that problem always.
Yeah, and it's such a long book.
I know. Again, don't get me wrong. I love the 96. But had they put just a tiny bit more of, like, the criticism of this, of this, if they wove a tiny bit more of that in, I would have been happier. But yeah, let's talk about our two Emmas. Oh, I actually have to say, I have to credit, I actually watched much of the adaptations to prepare for this when I was in New York. And so I got to watch them with my Aunt Neely, who has given us information.
Wonderful.
Yes. So with my aunt, who is, like I am, member of the Jane Austen Society and has many insights. And I wanted to bring up one insight about that Neely has about Emma, which I think she said that she felt like we didn't really focus on in the book, that both films have their own ways of focusing on, which is Emma's loneliness.
Oh, that's lovely.
That her sadness and her loneliness and both adaptations deal with that in different ways. But it's really beautiful that the 1996 starts, like the gift that she's giving to the Westons is a globe that she painted, and that represent, like, for a woman who has never traveled, has never even, seen the sea in a country as small as England, surrounded by water. The idea of gifting a hand-painted representation of the globe was a really beautifully kind of compact way to express that.
Yeah. Well, and the little hug that she gave her when she said, I'm so happy for you, and you see her face fall, I thought was really beautiful.
God, so good.
I think Gwyneth Paltrow was so good as Emma. Her very opening scene, I didn't care for as much. Just the first, I don't know. It might have just been what happens when you first start watching any period drama and you just take just a second to acclimate to the language. Because it just felt a little bit, I don't know what you would call it, just a little snooty, just right at first, I suppose. But as she went on, I thought she was just channeling, God, it was like an Audrey Hepburn movie. It was like watching Audrey Hepburn. If you closed your eyes, you could almost hear her. So I thought that she was lovely. But she showed so much on her face, I think, that I felt for Emma in a way that our other actress, that Ramallah, I think, couldn't quite convey. She seemed very approachable and very nice, and we talked about whether or not we'd want to hang out with Emma. Like, she certainly seemed like someone we would want to hang out with, but not necessarily someone I cared deeply about in a way that I think Gwyneth Paltrow brought across.
Yes, I agree with you. I mean, again, in terms of the loneliness, I feel like both adaptations and both actresses expressed it in very different ways. I really love in the 2009 all of the scenes between Emma and Mr. Woodhouse. A lot of them, like Mr. Woodhouse, got an expanded role.
Mr. Woodhouse is my favorite thing about the 2009. He is perfect. If I could pick up Michael Gambon and shove him into the 96 movie, add a little Frank and add a little more Frank and Jane, and you have just perfection.
No, he is actually possibly the best part. I
think he is the best part. Hands down.
Stunning, and he manages to not be silly, like a little silly, because he has to be a little silly, because I really loved how the 2009 really showed us how differently different characters interact with him. Like, I feel like there's like a basic, it's like a litmus test of goodness.
Yes.
Of how
that's beautiful.
Right? So like Mrs. Elton like immediately was like so dismissive of him. I mean, she is in the book as well, but I feel like the scene really showed us to what extent that she is dismissive of his concerns and of him. Like, he becomes this object, as in the book, of like, oh, well, you should just, he's a problem to solve. Like, oh, you poor thing that you have this horrible burden on you. Which is not untrue. I mean, that's the 2009, I think, really shows so beautifully how much this father and daughter love each other. Yeah. And the fact that he is, in fact, a burden, but he's a burden that Emma doesn't see as a burden because of the love. And so I just really, and, I said this in the book, the scene where they go to Mr. Knightley's house and he has all of the stuff arranged for him. Like, I just love that in general, that you see, because you have all this time to luxuriate in the story, you get a lot more of the domestic scenes, which we had said that we loved in the book, that it had many domestic scenes. I love how you see how often Mr. Knightley is at their house. Yeah. Like, just constantly. He's just at their house all the time before either of them figure out that they're in love with each other. And that was for me, a very subtle There's just a lot of subtleties about that stuff that I love.
Sure.
But Gwyneth Paltrow is my Emma because for me, as much as the other Emma is, very approachable, very relatable.
Yeah, definitely very relatable. I think that's a good word for her. Yeah.
She is lacking exactly that thing that I brought up about the book, where in a way Emma is us getting to explore the idea of a Fitzwilliam Darcy, but a woman in that role. And Gwyneth Paltrow does that perfectly. Like exactly that thing you said about the way she's speaking in the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
She's doing demonstrative.
Yes. It's a wedding speech, so it's very different.
Right.
No, I think that's a really good point.
Well, and she does this throughout. You can constantly see where she is playing the role that she knows she's supposed to play. Like, I feel
and doing it masterfully. Like, she shines in those moments, I think.
But you can also tell how, like, somehow, the stuff with her face, like, somehow you can tell when she's being the society woman, the most important woman in the community. Right. She's being a Woodhouse, but you can also see, even though she's doing it so beautifully, how painful for her it is sometimes, because every aspect of just regular Emma is revolting against this role that she has to play, that she's constantly having this conflict.
Oh, even though she's so?
I do. I mean, she doesn't always, but like there are moments where you can tell sometimes she's pouty and stuff like that because she's Emma and we need her to be that as well. But I feel like Gwyneth Paltrow really does a great job of showing us the moments when she's being Emma Woodhouse, but Emma underneath that wishes she didn't have to do it.
Sure, when you can sometimes see the bird in the cage.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
I think I hear what you're saying. Mm-hmm.
But, except when she truly behaves badly, like at Box Hill, except when she truly behaves badly, I feel like you never lose the sense of this character and her responsibilities to the community. Yes. And I just never felt that really with the 2009 Emma. You never, like, she's friends, she's
there
good.
Was a moment. I think she was always very sweet with Mr. Weston in the 2009, talking about Frank specifically and just being reassuring to him in a way that was very sweet. But I think it's the only time that I really saw that.
But she's sweet, but you never have the sense that she's living on a different plane than everyone else, and that she has responsibilities that were dictated to her by her station.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, she's good.
I do.
But I feel like you lose the sense that she's, the loneliness. Part of the loneliness is because she has no peers, right? We talked about it in the book.
This is something I think I see a lot in Emma doesn't have a sister. We're so used to seeing these Austen characters with sisters.
She had a sister. She has a sister, but her sister's in London.
Well, okay, yeah, one okay, right. That's true, but not one that we get like on the page and have their interactions and things. So it is interesting to see, and I thought it was very sharply shown in the 96 version about how she kind of takes Harriet under her wing, and she is under the wing of, it was Miss Taylor and now Mrs. Weston.
Right.
So Miss Taylor is what I was going to say. I was trying to think of her first name, but I don't think we get it actually because it was her governess, so she didn't call her by her first name.
Right. But
I loved those scenes where we would go immediately from her somewhat performative relationship with Harriet from time to time. And then, performative's not the right word, but you could just see the class difference, I suppose. You could just
Which is important. You need to see that.
Which is so important, yes. But then you would see her with Mrs. Weston, and Mrs. Weston doing that same, like, loving, guiding thing, doing it, I would argue, better because she is wiser than Emma.
Absolutely.
But it did make me think, God, Emma doesn't have a peer. Like the closest thing to a peer that she has is definitely Knightley, which
exactly
makes sense, and could have been Jane, but for reasons is not Jane. Yeah,
right. Now, see, that's something I love about 2009. I feel like they did sometimes a little heavy-handed, like that whole speech she said about how she and Frank and Jane were all like bound to each other some way because they all lost mothers. Like, that is true in the book. I mean, that's part of the subtext of the book. But she never says that outright. It would just was like
right. Well, we get all of that it's all that preamble right there in the very beginning. Remember? It's
okay,
like
that whole thing's super
up.
weird. That's super weird with like baby Emma and the mom, and yeah, that part's a little weird.
Yes,
I did not like that.
That's a little weird. We also have already like a precursor of scolding about Miss Bates. Like there's just a lot of stuff in the opening of the 2009 that's stuff that comes later in the book or is just part of your like I just feel like there were moments where they were not trusting us in the 2009 to understand
Can we
stuff.
talk about the weird random in the middle of episode 2 suddenly we get voiceover out of nowhere that is completely unnecessary and terrible? Did you notice this?
Oh, Emma's voiceover about
Yes.
Yeah.
I know, so weird.
It was so weird. Suddenly,
know.
in the middle of episode 2, horrible, unnecessary voiceover, which, without being unkind, I do feel that particular actress needed a little bit more voiceover than Gwyneth Paltrow.
Sure.
The few times we gave Gwyneth Paltrow voiceover, there were a couple times it worked for me beautifully. Her diary, everything with her diary worked for me very, very well.
So
and
funny.
Also...
So you could just bring up stuff from the 1996 and I'll just start laughing because like almost all of it is in my head.
Sure, that's fine. That's fine. So when she's doing the diary voiceover, that works for me beautifully. Again, the very end when we have the narration to camera and right at the beginning when we have the actual narration, I thought were both beautiful because it's very Austen. It's just very Austen, which I like. But there were a couple of times. Oh, and the other one that I liked, I wanted to say, is when Harriet throws everything into the fire and says, "Goodbye, Mr. Elton." And we hear, "Hello, Mr. Knightley," or "Hello, Mr. Churchill." That's what it was. That was very cute. I liked that one too.
Yes.
But all of the other ones, the actress was doing it. Her face showed you. We don't need the voiceover. Her face is doing it perfectly. You don't need these 3 or 4 words. Trust us. Trust her. We've got this. We understand.
Yeah.
It was too bad.
Yeah, there were definitely moments. I mean, again, it's 4 hours where a lot of it was really well done, but there were a few moments where I was like, we don't need this right now. But wait, that wasn't what I was going to talk about when I talked about...
Yeah, I'm sorry. I derailed
No.
on the voiceover thing.
No,
I had a lot of notes
interrupted
about the voiceover. Like, why are we doing this?
No, I interrupted myself by talking about the line about her and Frank and Jane. I was going to talk about the competitiveness. I do like how the 2009 really brought out kind of slowly but really quite explicitly the Emma being jealous of Jane maybe was also a tiny bit heavy-handed, although in the book it's pretty explicit from the beginning also.
Yeah.
I like that they did a really good job of showing us how much Knightley is jealous of Frank Churchill.
Yes.
I really like that because I do think, I mean, it was while we were talking about that, I kind of realized how much that is an element of the book. And I like the parallel then that we have the people who are the two people of highest station in the community who have all this responsibility towards others. And then these two people who again, the 2009, I do like that we have empathy for them for having been like this whole thing of that they, because their mothers died, they were forced to leave the community. I like that bond between Frank and Jane. And I like that we have empathy for them for having lost the community that they were supposed to be part of. But I also like the just humanity of having these two people who feel so much responsibility for others also having just petty jealousy.
Yes. Yeah. No, I like that too. I like, we don't get it as much in the 96, but we get, again, excellent adaptation when one of the things we talked about in the book was about how I read aloud that line about how he thought that she was flawless even with all of her flaws or something like that. Mm-hmm. And instead we give Jeremy Northam, we give Knightley the line, maybe it is our imperfections which make us so perfect for one another, which is perfect adaptation. But I love, because he is confessing. He's like, no, he says all the things that I don't think they showed as much in the movie, but the things that I argued about Mr. Knightley in the book is like, I'm always, telling you off and can be a little high and mighty sometimes. And I appreciated that they had that moment there.
Well, and again, he just, okay, let's talk about our two Knightleys.
Sure.
Yeah, I know a lot of people really love Johnny Lee Miller as Knightley. And
he seems so young to me.
Well, right. So
he
they did
not seem 16 years older than Emma.
Right. So that's obviously a choice they made to have the ages feel more appropriate to each other.
Okay.
I'm going to assume that was a choice they made because it's, they could have. But
did they never mention the age difference? I don't think I noticed.
They probably
Maybe they
do.
don't.
No, they probably do, but whatever.
Whatever. Yeah.
For the visuals, it was a little easier to stomach.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But on the flip side, I think that he lacked. I mean, I had said about that one scene where he's scolding Emma, and how Jeremy Northam manages to just cover so many emotional states at one time. And I think that in 2009. I like it. I like the scenes where he's being generous. Like, I like it when he's being kind of more casual and just being hanging around. But I feel like he always, when he's upset with Emma, for me, he always overplayed it. Like, he just went straight to anger.
Yeah. Sure.
And that is a choice you can make with Knightley, but I think it's a less interesting choice.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that the essence of his character is to be someone who will scold but will also kind of feel bad doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that makes him a more interesting character.
Yes.
And the confession, I mean, that confession is in the book, and that confession is in both adaptations. And I think that confession is appropriate for Knightley to say, I am kind of an ass. Like, I did all this crappy shit. And you definitely can read that scene as like, oh, I like you because I can be an ass and you'll take it. But I don't think that's what Knightley's saying. I think that what he's saying is, I'm kind of an ass and somehow you still like me.
And somehow you forgive me. And
Right.
Yes. Yeah. No, I completely agree. That came through in the adaptation beautifully.
Right.
And I was going to ask you because I didn't have time to check in my book, but if you remember, if this is from the text, when the Jeremy Northam Knightley says, "A true friend does not doubt, but hopes."
I think that's adaptation. I'm not. Oh goodness.
That's
right.
Gorgeous.
Right?
That was
I know.
Gorgeous and perfect.
Shit. I don't remember.
To me, I think that says so much more about accepting the flaws of a person that you love.
Yes.
Not just like, oh yeah, you mess up, but I love you. But like, no, you mess up, and I believe in the goodness of you so
right.
deeply,
and your potential.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that was a gorgeous bit of dialogue.
Well, and it is interesting because in
and
that
delivered
adaptation,
perfectly.
Yeah. Well,
I'm sorry.
That dude. I'm sorry.
And then we get that whole thing where she's thinking about it, and we just see him. He's doing the kissing the hand, and he looks up at camera. You're like, oh god.
Yep. Yes.
I need my vapors. Goodness.
Side note, one of my favorite books that you liked less than I did, and I told you not to watch the adaptation, but now you should.
Possession.
He is in Possession.
I'm going to try Possession again.
He plays Ash in Possession.
I know. I started to watch some of that. Yeah, and Jennifer Ely too, right?
Yep.
No, I've got to.
Yep.
I must. I will.
And Gwyneth Paltrow's
Also,
in that.
And Toby Stevens, right?
Yes, Toby Stevens plays the asshole.
No. Okay. Yeah. We'll watch.
Maybe we'll do that one. If we don't want to cover that book, we could do that as a commentary track with someday.
I would be very willing to cover that book. There was so much about it that I loved. It's just
okay. That's a big
job. It got a little muddy in the middle. Is all.
Right.
It's a big job. Yeah,
that's a big job. That's probably a book we would have to do in more than one episode. Because
there's a lot there.
Well, right. Sorry, we're just going on a tangent here, everyone. But everyone should read Possession because it's gorgeous.
Possession. A.S. Byatt.
Yes, it is by A.S. Byatt. A lot of her. I mean, I actually thought about that. Like, we also there are other books of hers that have had great adaptations. So maybe we should do.
Oh,
so
interesting.
But yeah, it's a book for people who don't know about it. It's a book that has two timelines, but also it's about two writers.
And
so you have
work of fiction, yes,
right. So you have all of this very dense poetry written by two of the characters, and like that's a huge part of the story. So you actually like really have to dig in and read that to truly get everything that you can, like, just to squeeze every bit of meaning out of this amazing book. You have to read all of the epic poetry as well.
Which I loved all of that. I had trouble with some of the epic poetry just because it's not always my bag. I love poetry, but I like it to be a little more condensed than, pages and pages and pages. That's like a myth, basically, very like Tolkien-esque. So, but for me, it was in the letters that I started to lose it. Not the letters between the two back and forth. I loved those.
Right.
But
no, I know what you're talking about.
No. It was a diary. It was the teenage girl's diary. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah. They're
supposed to be clean edit. Here we go.
Right. This is a great book. As you can tell from us talking about, there are a lot of elements to this book, and every bit of it is worth reading. Yes. Okay, enough about that. Back to this. But yes, Jeremy Northam is amazing. Okay, can we just talk about Jeremy Northam scenes?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, please. Also, he wears that garb. I don't know what you want to call it. That like costuming like no one else.
Yep. Yes, he does. He wears
it looks so silly on so many people.
Collar.
Also, the dancing scenes.
Yeah.
Yes. Very good.
Yes.
Very good.
Yes. That man is spectacular. So, I guess there is the adaptive choice about when they're talking about the dance, like after he saves Harriet and he says, who will you dance with? And she says, I'll dance with you if you ask me. And then they added in, it's not like we're brother and sister. And I'm sorry, but that moment where she walked away and he's like, indeed, we are not. Possibly one of my favorite moments in all of film. For like no reason other than I love that man. Yes, I love it. That is a good moment.
On-screen kisser too, from what I can tell. Looks good to me, is what I'm saying.
But what I really want to talk about is the archery scene. The archery scene might be my favorite scene in the 1996, partly because of it as an adaptative choice. That scene does not exist in the book.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right? They just are having that argument. The argument exists. The choice to have it be outdoors while they're doing archery is incredible. Because, first of all, those two have such good chemistry. Like the other two don't have great chemistry. Like at the end, they're kind of cute. But yeah, these two have amazing chemistry. And I love that she is completely wrong. Mm-hmm. And the more heated she gets, again, she's right to argue his approach in his argument.
Right. Her argument is good, but she is wrong about this situation.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And that's what I love is I love that they chose archery because while she's getting more and more heated about this thing that I think she kind of knows she's wrong, like she's doing that thing where she's like, she's pissed at him for the way he's arguing it. And she's also kind of pissed at him for being right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And so I love that each time she shoots an arrow, they just get more and more off target as she digs herself deeper into this argument. And I was just like, this is so perfect because one, it's so much fun. Like it's just a fun scene to watch, which is always a good thing. We always like to watch an engaging scene no matter what. Mm-hmm. And two, it's such a great scene for not just each of their characters, for completely illuminating their characters, but also for taking this argument that if you just had it in a room, like it is in the book, would be kind of boring. Mm-hmm. And they just chose a framework for this scene that made the art, like just brought out everything amazing about this argument.
Mm-hmm. It's a great little visual metaphor and
it's just really dynamic.
That playfulness is very there. Yes.
Exactly.
It's sexy. Yeah.
Oh, no. Yeah, it's sexy. Like when he's... Sorry.
No, I know.
Oh, wow. I didn't intend to be quite this upfront about my Jeremy Northam feelings, although I did warn you, I think.
That's okay. Let's talk about Jane Fairfax later.
But yeah, there's just a moment where he just, like reacts while he's got his arrow knocked, and it's just like, I'm sorry, that man could do anything. But yeah, and then the don't I should have written down the line. I always forget what he says, but I just love how he says it. Like,
Try not to kill my dogs.
Yes. It's so good. Sorry.
No,
it's so good. And again, so perfect for their two characters because she's kind of all over the place right here. And he has his issues and he has his not perfect motivations for the points he's making and the arguments he's making. But he's ultimately like standing on firmer ground than she is.
Yeah.
And so it's just every bit of it is perfect. So like that moment where he's allowed to have that amount of sarcasm towards her to like really just bring his point completely home, it's just perfect.
No, I agree. It's a great scene.
Yeah, it's just, and right, there's just so many choices in this like that. Like you had talked about the irony cuts. Like there's also there's cuts where it's both irony, but also I felt like you'll have people like somebody talking, like a conversation will start with two people talking about a thing going on in the community, and then the conversation will almost like continue, but you keep changing which house you're in. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, I think I wrote here, like, oh, right, something that starts with the Bateses and then goes to Jane and then Knightley. And it's just like you keep changing where you are and who's talking, but they're having the same conversation. Mm-hmm. And I felt like that was also, it's just such a economical way to tell this part of the story that needs to be told, but also express how tight this community is, how small and how connected and interwoven they all are.
So Austen. Yes, right. That's what I mean about it being such a strong adaptation. I really think that they nailed it.
It
is too bad about Jane and Frank. Yeah. But I suppose tone is the best way to say it, but like the
texture.
The texture is good, or style
of
Austen just comes through very strongly.
Yeah. And through stuff that's not dialogue necessarily.
Yes. Yeah. They've really used their medium.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like Jane Austen directed it.
Totally true. I mean, it feels like this, if Jane Austen was consulting this, she would have been like, do this. I think you're totally right. I think this might be again, we're about to watch Clueless, which I have always claimed is actually the best Jane Austen adaptation. We'll see when we do our commentary track. Mm-hmm. I made a point of not rewatching it so that I can
I think I probably will. I don't know. We'll see.
What?
I'm afraid. I said I think I probably will rewatch it before we
I will not
do a live commentary.
Yeah, I'm not going to, because I want to come out on the other side of the live commentary with my verdict of whether that is in fact.
Oh, okay.
So and I also have seen that a million times. I know it practically by heart as well.
Oh, it's been a long time for me.
It's probably been a long time for me too, but I've watched many watches. Okay, so let's talk about Jane.
So the 2009, we get all of the Jane Fairfax story, basically.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, I had trouble in the book, if you'll remember, following the Dixon story and where she was staying. And there was just a lot of things to keep track of. And I could not care about her for a long time.
Right.
So the 2009 version helped me grasp that story really well, which is great. And I liked the actress, too. She was very...
I liked her Jane Fairfax. Yeah, I liked her choices, that she made her quite forceful, like that she actually really stood up to Mrs. Elton quite like in a way that I wouldn't necessarily have expected from the way I read the book, which probably was very informed by the 1996 Jane Fairfax, who is much more demure. Ironically, I know Polly Walker, who played Jane Fairfax in 1996, much more from Rome, where she plays a not at all demure character.
I'm going to have to watch some Rome, because I'll tell you what, we had our first cut to Jane Fairfax, and I was like, oh, holy smokes, who is this woman?
Yes.
She is gorgeous.
You will enjoy her in Rome. Let's just say that.
Okay. Looking forward to that.
You will enjoy her a lot in Rome. Yes, she plays a character that much more suits the very kind of fiery way she looks.
I could not believe her name was Polly Walker. I was ready for she's so exotic and fierce looking. I was just, I don't know what I thought that her name would be, but
that's
anyway.
So funny.
Yeah.
Yes. You will enjoy her in Rome. Rome is fun.
Okay.
Also, Ray
I
Stevenson.
need to watch Rome anyway.
Also,
Yeah.
Can Heights. I mean, there's just like,
There's
just
a bunch of people in Rome.
there's
I'll watch it.
Great show. It's really
Okay.
good.
Will do.
But yes, the 2009 Jane, I found very satisfying. I found her to be more to add to my vision of her from the book in ways
Yes.
that were very interesting to me. Very
Yeah.
sympathetic.
No, I think that's right.
You really felt like even had this been your first experience of Emma, you still, without knowing what's going on with her and Frank, I feel like you still have some sense, like you're invested in her story.
You are. That's absolutely
and you don't
right.
know
Yeah.
what's going on, but you understand that something's very wrong.
Yes. Yeah. You understand how she's clearly upset. I think she tugs at your heartstrings. I liked her very much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's. I mean, again, it feels like a wasted opportunity in the 1996.
Yes.
I mean, come on,
That's true.
like,
It's too bad.
she's
'cause
great.
there's so
I know.
much
We
about
haven't
it
even
that's
talked about the fact
perfect.
that it's
She
Ewan
is great.
McGregor.
Ewan McGregor is perfectly cast. Oh my God. Yes. That first opening sequence where we've got them at the pianoforte and then he does all the singing.
Yes.
He is just nailing Frank Churchill as just being a little bit pompous, a little bit full of himself, a little bit cavalier.
Right. And an
He
exhibitionist.
could have really nailed it. An exhibitionist for sure. Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
I do really like how the actor in the 2009 did how petulant he was at the end, like when they were at Knightley's and he had just run into Jane on the road and had
Box Hill. Mm-hmm.
No, before Box Hill.
No,
When they were at Mr.
yes.
Knightley's before that, and he was so grouchy, and Emma was like, "No, you need to eat." And then at Box Hill, like I just really feel, as much as I dislike Frank Churchill, I made that clear in the book discussion. I do think that he added something. Like I'm still angry with Frank, but you can see in Box Hill, like when Jane gets up and goes away, you can see how he is angry with himself. Like that he was lashing out, and you can really feel that he knows he's doing wrong.
Yeah.
So I think that he did add depth. Again, Ewan McGregor would have done that beautifully had they given him the chance.
Material.
Right?
Yes. No, for sure.
We know what he's capable of. But I do really like how I just honestly really love how the Jane and Frank story is played out in the 2009. I think it's beautifully done.
I agree. Yeah, they really did nail that. And Michael Gambon, yes.
Right.
Yeah,
So
those are, I
beautiful.
think, the things that the 2009 really had going for it.
Right.
And the rich colors were really beautiful, too. Although the lighting in the 96 was masterful. All those shots where you get, like, the window light and you're framing the actors and actresses in the window light. Oh, my God. Gorgeously done.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, we haven't talked about the Eltons. Shall we talk about the Eltons?
Sure. I don't know if I had a strong preference of one Elton's over the other. I think they both pretty much nailed it.
They did them very differently, and I liked both.
Yeah.
I'm not the biggest Alan Cumming fan. I guess that's all I need to say. Like, I just,
Yeah,
I don't know. Sometimes I don't know. Back then, I liked him a lot better. I don't know. But what's her name? Give me a second. Oh, Juliet Stevenson. I love her.
Oh, yeah.
I love her. Did you ever see the film Truly, Madly, Deeply, Madly, Truly, Deeply? Did you ever see that?
No.
Okay.
I know the Savage Garden song from 97.
You need to see that. That's her and Alan Rickman, and it's so beautiful.
Okay.
So beautiful. It's a beautiful film.
Okay.
And I'm just forgetting which order those words go in. But yes, I love her from that, and so I kind of already came into this loving her. But I think, she played Mrs. Elton way broader, and I'm okay with that.
What do you mean broader?
She's a little too absurd. Like she doesn't feel like a real person exactly. She feels more like she's playing a caricature.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I'm okay with that because I really enjoy it.
Yes. Yeah,
It's
no,
just
me too. I
honestly
thought it
that
very enjoyable.
simple. Like, it was really interesting in the 2009 to see Mrs. Elton played as more of a realistic person.
Played straight. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I agree. I like both of them. All right. Well, I think we've done a lovely job with this. I think my final thing I want to say is that I did come out of this feeling like, still, like we said, the 1996 is practically perfect. And
yes. It's my new favorite.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled. Mm-hmm.
And I do feel like it's almost like I would recommend people watch both of them, because I feel like for the sake of understanding the book.
Yeah, if you're not going to read the book, then you should watch both.
Right. And I just feel like
Yes.
that's going to give you a really filled out kind of,
Yes.
that's doing the book the service that it deserves. Like, if you're only going to watch one, definitely watch the 96. But I feel like watching both of them really does catch all of the richness of what is going on in that book, and there is a lot.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So yeah, I mean, I just feel like, okay, for Sense and Sensibility, we only talked about one adaptation. For Pride and Prejudice, I don't feel like that's true. Like, I really think the BBC has got it covered.
Is the one.
Right.
Yeah,
but
so
this was an interesting experience for me, because even though I have a strong preference, there's so much that I value about the 2009 one that I do feel like I would recommend watching both to people.
I mean, you do get much more story.
Yeah. And again, and parts of them that are really parts of the story that are very important to me personally about Austen's worldview and storytelling.
Yeah,
okay.
That's a good point.
All right, let's talk about favorite things. I think I showed my hand already. What's your favorite thing?
My favorite thing is probably just going to be that I could watch the 96 Emma on mute and just be delighted. It's so beautiful. I loved the costumes, the hair. Again, the lighting was crazy. The interior shots of Emma's home were really gorgeous. And similarly, they did so much with color. And I loved all the scarves they kept giving Michael Gambon. Wrapping him up in the colorful scarves was really beautiful. So I think that visually both movies are stunning. They're just spectacular in the literal sense of the word. They are a spectacle to behold. So I really liked that.
I'm going to pick something from each one, if you don't mind.
Okay. Not at all.
Yeah, for sure. My favorite thing is the archery. Even though I love Indeed We Are Not Brother and Sister, it's the archery. The archery scene is just, it just makes me happy on every level that a scene in a movie can make me happy. And my favorite thing in the 2009 is actually a moment that isn't in the book. It's the conversation between Emma and her father when they're at Mr. Knightley's, where he basically says, like, I'm such a burden. And she says, she talks about how he didn't, when their mother died, how important it was for her and her sister that he didn't send them away, that she felt so loved. And I just felt like that. I think I said this earlier in the podcast, but the richness that they gave to the interactions between Emma and Mr. Woodhouse were so valuable to me and so beautiful, and really they weren't in the book the same way, but I feel like they were extrapolated from the reality of the book in a way that really made sense to me, and just felt like a great choice to add that more explicitly to the story.
Completely agree. Yes.
So that's it. This was fun. This was really
was
really
a lot of fun. Yes.
It was a
I'm
lot of
so
fun.
glad. It was, this was delightful. I'm so glad that now I know about the 96 Emma, because gosh,
Right.
that's going to be a favorite to go back to.
Seriously, I am proof you can just watch that thing over and over again, and it's just fun every single time. It really is.
Yeah.
It's so much fun. I watch it all the time. All right. Well, for people who are listening to this in real time, we will hopefully see you tomorrow night if you become our patron to watch Clueless together. And for everyone, no matter when you're listening to this, we will meet up again to start discussing A Room with a View, which is also exciting.
Oh, God, I'm enjoying it so much.
It's beautiful.
Yes.
It's so beautiful. Yeah, I'm really, we had so much fun talking about Howard's End. I'm really looking forward to doing some Forrester again.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Yay.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, from Common Room Radio, I'm Elizabeth Stevens.
And I'm Daphne Olive. Can I Just Say Podcast is a Common Room Radio production. For more information and our other shows, visit commonroomradio.com. To show your support, pledges of as little as $1 a month can make a big difference. Visit patreon.com/commonroomradio to pledge support and access bonus features that are just for patrons. And join the conversation by using the hashtag #CanIJustSay and follow us on Twitter @JustSayPodcast. We request that you keep your tweets respectful and positive, and you can always email us at podcast@commonroomradio.com. Thanks for listening.